On the Brain Possible podcast, we talk weekly with practitioners, parents, caregivers, and experts who share their knowledge on a variety of treatments and issues that matter to you. Our guest today is Liza Blas, speaker, transformational coach, and the host of the Very Happy Stories podcast. She brings hope and empowerment and validation to parents raising kids with unique challenges. Liza delivers inspiring stories and shares her best practices through her podcast, speaking engagements, and personal transformational coaching. Her stories are inspired by her personal experience navigating the complex conditions of her two children, including depression, anxiety, ADHD, OCD, ASD, Tourette syndrome, and Lyme disease. Well, hello, Liza. Thank you so much for joining us here today on the Brain Possible podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I always get excited when I get to actually meet the people I've been communicating with and following on Instagram.
I know.
So let's dive in. Can you share your journey of how you left a successful commercial career as a commercial real estate broker to begin Very Happy Stories?
Yes. Thank you so much. I was a commercial real estate broker for about 15 years and I very much enjoyed it. But I did live this private life of stress and uncertainty that whole time, as both of my kids were really struggling with serious mental health challenges. I mean, my son had suicidal ideation at the age of 9,
Oh my gosh.
really complex mental health things. And then for my daughter, it was a very complicated situation where she was really struggling with eating disorder, OCD, hallucinations, panic. So professionally, I was thriving, but personally in our home, it was crisis. And it went on for many years, over 5 years, until my kids were both ultimately diagnosed with Lyme disease. And that was kind of just the tip of our biotoxin load, to be honest with you. And so during the pandemic, my kids were in the throes of Lyme treatment, which is really painful. It's physically, emotionally, spiritually taxing. And also being in commercial real estate, I really was not working because that industry clearly took a hit. And
I know.
yeah, so I actually had been wanting to stop being a broker. But these sales cycles are so long. And so I had stopped taking on new clients and I really just had to finish things up. And that's kind of what happened. There was this natural pause by the universe and my life circumstances. And what ended up happening is my daughter and I were on a Zoom telehealth call with her therapist. And we were talking about, do we have the desire to be happy? And I told the therapist, Ben has been the therapist. I said, my daughter's doing so well, but I feel like she's doesn't have the desire to be happy. Sometimes people who have mental illness, kind of get stuck with this identity, and I certainly, as her mother, just wanted to check in. And he asked her, well, Ava, it's my daughter, do you want to be happy? And she said, yes, I do want to be happy. And he said, well, what would make you happy? And she said, well, I would be happy if my mom was happy. And I was like, I'm happy. I'm the happiest person out there. And he said, she doesn't think so. And I'm I really had to stop and pause and realize I'm not happy. I have really been faking my happiness for my children for many years. I've been a cheerleader with this big fake smile because this is not the life that I wanted. I did not want to be in the Lyme world and the mental health crisis world. And I was really faking my happiness. And so as I was transitioning, I'm you know what, I do want to stop being a commercial real estate broker, but what do I want to do? I really need to do something that makes me happy.
Mhm.
And I realized I really wanted to share my story. Like I had journaled my heart out every day during the hardest days of in this world of uncertainty and not being properly diagnosed. And I decided I'm just going to start a podcast and share my stories. And these are good stories. They're painful, but at the end of the day, these can be happy stories. And so I named my podcast Very Happy Stories. And I just went on this new journey. And it's led to interviewing and meeting so many amazing people in the spaces that I need to be connected to.
Mhm.
I've talked to Dr. Rawls in the Lyme world. I've talked to the leading experts, with mold and toxins and mental health. And so that's kind of what I do now is I'm dedicated to my podcast and helping others as a coach. And I'm also launching an online course. And I'm kind of in this world of empowerment, and
Mhm.
healing. And that's kind of where I am right now.
Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful. I can completely relate to what the therapist
Yeah.
and what that little conversation there, um because I had a little girl when my son passed away, and my Elizabeth,
Yeah.
and they said the same thing to me, that she will be
Did they?
happy if you're happy.
Yes. It's
So
so true. There
kind of.
is an energetic shift that takes place because once I launched my new baby, right, this podcast, this endeavor, and I really started filling myself up with joy in the work I was doing, it's like all of a sudden my kids became much more capable
Mm,
and they didn't need me in a certain way. And I really saw it with my own eyes that filling myself up with my own happiness is one of the best things I could do for my kids. That's the cheerleading they need. That's the modeling they need. And they're not going to take care of themselves if I don't model this is how you take care of yourself.
mhm. Yeah, I think that's something that I hear time and time again. People learn eventually because they burn themselves out for a few years or however long,
Yeah.
just trying to heal their children, and
Yes.
then all of a sudden they realize that their children can only get so far without them healing themselves.
Oh my gosh, yes, it's so true. It is. I mean, I have to say, both of my children being ill was the invitation that I needed and the permission to work on myself. I never would have done it. I would never have worked on my long anxiety issues without the presentation of them being so ill. So
Mhm.
there is something there.
Well, I want to hear about all the things that you are doing to be happy and that you have done to heal you and bring that out, truly. But let's just pause right there for a
Yeah.
moment. Can Both of your children are exceptional and currently healing from Lyme disease and mold exposure, as you
Yes.
just mentioned. Can you share with us what has helped you in navigating these challenges? What have you learned from this?
The biggest navigation tool that has helped me is aligning with my intuition and running on my gut. Um, that really is what has helped me because I landed on the right treatments for them. And so, step one really is about pulling back the curtain and being honest and sharing your story. So when my daughter was in the worst of the symptoms, she was hallucinating every single day, multiple times a day, being attacked by entities. It was horrific. And
Gosh.
my parents didn't even know. And if you're stuck in isolation. And this happens to a lot of people because we put up these mama bear walls to protect our children. We do that to protect them from judgment and shame. But if you live walled up, you are losing connectivity with the world, and you're not going to help your child. So you have to get over your own judgment and complexes about shame and start telling every single person that will listen what is happening. That's really where I started getting movement. I mean, it is in the most basic sense, step one. And I finally did start telling people, yeah, my daughter is having suicidal ideation. I mean, we had a therapist and we had a psychiatrist and we had a doctor, but I still wasn't getting where I needed to be. And finally, a very good friend of mine was not a very good friend of mine at the time. She was a lovely acquaintance. She pulled me aside at a holiday party in 2019. And she said, Liza, I'm not trying to make you jump down a rabbit hole, but have you looked into Lyme disease? Because your daughter, the things that you're saying, present exactly the same way as my good friend's daughter, and they're about the same age. And I said, no, but like it hit me in the pit of my stomach of like, oh my God, I think that this is resonating. Because my daughter did go to camp 2 summers. And then so I then went to my daughter's functional medicine doctor, who was trying to help us out with some supplements to help out with the mental health issues. She said, oh yes, we should rule out Lyme. We were ruling out is what happened. Let's rule it out. And she actually had the very special test, which is called hygienics, in her office. And I went home with it and we did the hygienics test full panel, and she came back positive with a lot of things. And then I ended up testing my son too. And he was positive, not nearly to the extent of my daughter. So they had different courses of treatment. But yeah, so I think like step one is like being honest with yourself and the world that this is happening. That's how you're going to get the help you need. And then I really had to start using my intuition. And so seeing the signs. So an example of that, Emily, is I had listened to, I'm really big into research. I read a lot of books, a lot of podcasts. You got to multitask. That's why I love podcasts. And I did hear about a podcast of a woman who did whole body hyperthermia to treat her Lyme disease. And it's basically about heating your body up to like 107 degrees. Medically, you're sedated and it kills the bacteria. And I'm like, well, that is very interesting. But just 2 weeks ahead of that, a coworker of mine mentioned whole body hyperthermia to me on the phone. I had told him I'm leaving commercial real estate. I'm doing this new endeavor. My kids have Lyme. And he said, oh, well, you got to take them to Germany and do that whole body hyperthermia. So here it is, like telling people, right? Being honest. Here I am being vulnerable, telling a coworker about my children's situation, and then picking up the signs from the universe of like, well, he mentioned it. Then I hear this podcast, right? And so I just started exercising more of that and leaning in to your own gut intuition and just letting everything come to you. And long story short, my daughter did do the whole body hyperthermia months later, and it did eradicate her Lyme disease. There's a lot of healing that takes place, but that is what she ultimately needed.
Wow. So tell me about that.
So whole body hype. So the woman on the podcast, Michelle McKeon, that's not her podcast. She was on another podcast. I just reached out to her. I was like, everyone's on social media. And she was on the podcast talking about this experience. And she actually formed a company called Lyme and Cancer Services. And so that's what she does. She helps you navigate. So I reached out to her and she told me at the time, there were 3 places that did whole body hyperthermia. Now today there's 4. At the time, there were 3. And she was like, I can help you navigate which one would work best for your daughter. First of all, we need to take one of them off the list because of her age. And then there's questionnaires and surveys, not surveys, but like intake
Okay.
paperwork in order to, and she just facilitated that at no charge.
Oh.
And we ultimately ended up going to Santa Vive Medical Institute. They are in Mexico. And they've been doing it for a long time. It is a hospital. And what makes their Lyme program, they do a lot of things, but what makes their Lyme program different is they build in not just the whole body hyperthermia, but you're on a detox diet for 2 weeks. They do ozone, they do hyperbaric chamber. They do, you fill your day with even some energy work. My daughter did Rife machine. She had a lymphatic massage. They kind of throw everything at it in this very healing environment, which does look like paradise, and it's not cheap. But it's a 2-week program. And after that, you still do multiple phone calls with them as you heal. But that is what she needed. She came to a place which is very common in the Lyme world, where you treat very hard with antibiotics and herbs, and you do well. And then some people plateau. And then the herbal medication and the antibiotics start to work against you. They start, ripping through your gut or taking you down. And so that's what was happening. She started kind of being dizzy all the time. It lent itself to its own symptoms. And I really needed to just pull her off of that stuff. But then what complicated her even more was right before we did do whole body hyperthermia, she was exposed. We did learn she was exposed to mold. So it took her to another direction. But the Lyme piece for my child, for Ava, for my daughter, the Lyme piece was completed through whole body hyperthermia.
Wow, that is incredible.
Yeah. And I just want to say they do it twice. They detox you while you're there for the first 2 days. Then you do the treatment. You're sedated. They heat you up slowly to 108. It's somewhere between 107 and 109, depending on your own body.
Okay.
You are in twilight or that type of sleep. And they hold you there for, I think, 2 hours. And you're monitored the whole time. And then they bring you down and then they detox you, to get everything out, because you're going to have a serious die-off effect with all of this Lyme being killed, which can make you feel terrible, but you're in a hospital, so there's a lot of IVs that they do to help you. They also run an antibiotic through you intravenously. So the hyperthermia busts through the biofilms, and then you can get that antibiotic in you. And then they turn around and do it one more time. Again, detoxing. So you're there for 2 full weeks.
Wow. So how old was your daughter at that time?
At the time, she was 15 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how'd she do? Like, how was she doing during the time? Mentally and handling all of it?
It's super hard. It was challenging. She had been, though, in programs like for her OCD and eating disorder in the past. So she had some experience with programs and regimens, right? So, and she's just amazing. She really is like a really special kid that can handle that stuff. But they do vet you out before you come to question your mental stability, because it is so taxing. And they have therapy there. So she had a therapist there to help her. And they also have kind of like a spiritual therapist too, that was trying to help her just bring awareness to her vagus nerve system, or vagus nerve, to give them some awareness of like, yes, this is normal. This is happening. You've been in fight or flight. So it's such it was such an informational, spiritual time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did the whole family go or just you and her?
No, just me. And you just need one caretaker. Even adults, they encourage a caretaker to go because it's so taxing and they really want you to be able to heal and relax. And so to have a caretaker there, like for instance, some days I had to bring my daughter's meal to her. Like she wasn't able enough, to go downstairs. So that's like where the caretaker comes in. Like when I'm like, oh, you're not looking good. Let me go to the care center and see if they might have something. You need oxygen. It's just good to have that person to look out for you and
Mhm.
can be that mediator between the medical team of what you need because they have everything you need to make it through such
Mhm.
a challenging treatment.
That's a lot, but it sounds like a really healing experience and
It was.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm really happy that you found that. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so then you touched on mold, and we blew right through that one. What happened there?
Oh my gosh. I think this happened in a lot of homes during quarantine. We were stuck inside the house. We spent a lot of time indoors. I live in Chicago, so we've got our heater and air conditioner always running at some point. And we think
Mhm.
we have like
Right.
4 weeks out of the year where we like open windows, but my daughter had parked herself in the basement to do remote learning. So she was, what she started off her freshman year in high school, right out of the gates with remote learning and parked herself in the basement. And not only in the basement, she put herself in like this unfinished place where my HVAC is, because she's just kind of quirky like that. And like, I don't know, like she just was there. Lo and behold, we had mold in the crawl space close to right where she parked it for remote learning. And not only that, my HVAC unit was close to the crawl space, so it was kind of sucking in the air right by the crawl space. It was just kind of a recipe for disaster.
Mm.
And so before I took her to Sanoviv, I was very active on the Facebook group. There's a separate Facebook group of like what to expect, what you should bring. It's just a place where people that have been there and people looking into it can ask questions. And mold did come up a lot
Okay.
of make sure you look into mold first because it's one of the reasons why people don't recover, not just from hyperthermia, but recover in general. And so Michelle McKeon, who helped me navigate the whole journey for whole body hyperthermia, also specializes in mold. And I'm like, well, I already booked it, but I really do want to do the testing. And she told me you have to test your body for mold exposure and other biotoxins, meaning glyphosate, heavy metals, because ultimately, when you have such a load of toxins, this is when you are so vulnerable to other illnesses like Lyme and mold itself, or PANS, or like all these other things that pathogens, microbes that can impact you.
Mm-hmm.
You really set yourself up for being so vulnerable when you have such a heavy toxin load. And so you have to bring down your load. That's
Mm.
like a huge game changer in the world of chronic illness. Reduce inflammation, which it comes along with also reducing your toxin load. So before I left with my daughter, I tested both of my children for a full panel, I guess is what you would say, for mold and biotoxins. And then I also tested my house
Okay.
because I had to do both because
Yeah.
like if you can't heal, there's that whole expression where you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick.
So is all testing the same? I've kind of heard that, some people testing for mold, experts testing for mold, do it, but then some do it even like deeper dive for mold.
I know. That is a very common mold mold is like its own complication, right? So I was so desperate because I had already committed to the whole body hyperthermia. I'm like, I got to get this, I got to figure out this mold thing ASAP because my daughter, I can't bring her home to like a mold infested environment. So I ended up going with like the top, I went with like the Cadillac of mold testing.
Okay.
I don't know, knowing what I know, it did confirm that I did have mold in my crawl space. I did have mold in that my HVAC unit needed to be changed and everything needed to be fogged out. I had a remediation plan. Um, I think I still could have gotten the same results, maybe not using the Cadillac, but I was so pressed for urgency that, if we've all been in that place when when it comes to your kids and just getting it done, I just like kind of closed my eyes and I'm like, just write the check. I mean, it wasn't my finest decision, but I did, I did get the information that I needed. I think a lot of people could do it for a lot less. And we did remediate. Now, remediation I had to do in stages. And my husband told me, because I went to the Cadillac company, the remediation was like so overwhelming financially and physically that my husband sat me down and he was like, here's the thing. We are not going to shoot for 100%. We're just not. We're going to do the best we can. Let's shoot for 85, or 90. An A is an A, right? An A is an A. And I kind of needed, he needed to tell me that because you can go crazy over this stuff. So that's what we did. I didn't rip out my vents. I fogged it with that antimicrobial, antifungal, antibacterial, everything. And we did it multiple times. I didn't rip out my vents. And then I also, so we did do remediation, and then you're supposed to test after remediation. Well, I wasn't about to do that testing, that Cadillac testing again. So just by chance, again, I put myself out there into the universe. Everybody knows Liza's in the mold thing. One of my friends reached out to me and she said her daughter has Lyme. And she said, the mold dog is going through our area. It's only $500. Do you want him to make a stop at your house?
An actual dog?
An actual dog, Emily, who has been on Animal Planet. This man is from Florida and he has a mold dog and a bed bug dog. And he travels the country. Sometimes he does like a big sweep, and instead of like $2,000, it's only $500. Now, at this time, I'm throwing money out the window. That $500 to get my house sniffed at is like the biggest bang for your buck. The dog came through and it's amazing. He seeks every area. He's checking everything under sinks, fabrics. And the dog did point out 2 bathrooms that the Cadillac testing told me. They're like, you need to look into these areas because it's something it's behind. So we can't test it based on our type of testing. You're going to have to bring someone in and test that. And I didn't do it because, I did things in phases. Well, the dog sniffed it out.
The Animal Planet dog sniffed out these 2 bathrooms, and the Cadillac company also told you to be wary of those bathrooms?
Yes. And so what I ended up doing was focusing on those 2 areas. And then I brought in a hygienist. They have mold hygienist. Now, some people start with the mold hygienist. And you would start with the mold hygienist if you knew something was problematic, whereas I didn't know where my problem was. But let's say you had a bathroom, you had a tub that was leaking, and behind the tile it's leaking because you can see visible. And you're like, oh my God, now I don't know if there's mold. Okay, that's when you probably would go right to a hygienist, right?
Okay.
So once you kind of have an area figured, what I ended up doing, because I'm still in contact with our Lyme doctor, which is called a Lyme literate MD, otherwise known as an LLMD.
Okay. Wow.
And because My kids did come back with mold also in the testing. So they were each put on protocols to eliminate mold out of their body. It's really a lot of binders and supplements. It's just separate protocol. It's not nearly as invasive as like the house situation. So I talked to my LLMD and she gave me a list of companies in the Chicago area, because that's where I live, that she's vetted that do mold remediation. And so that I refer to her list, I bring in the hygienist, and then I get it properly remediated. And it was after the hygienist testing, it really was only my daughter's bathroom. It was not my son's. His just needed to be recaulked. And like there was water on the surface that the dog. So I mean, it's like a never ending thing. I really have to say, mold is like treating your house like another ill patient. It takes
Gosh.
time, it takes patience, it takes money. It is another being to look after. And I did it. And we ripped out a lot of carpeting, put in laminate flooring. I changed my daughter's mattress to a different type of material, a latex. So it's a lot. But it had to be done because I would do anything to heal her,
Mhm.
obviously all parents would. So we did make it through the journey. And we also have air purifiers in both of my kids' rooms. We use IQ Air. I know Air Doc is another big name, but it's kind of a lifestyle. I also, my own washer and dryer. I have the front loader. So you always have to keep that door open. I physically pull out the place where you pour the detergent, that I pull it out, I dry it out. I don't let water sit in anything.
Mhm.
And it's just about awareness and mindfulness. And there's actually so many resources now out there on mold. And it's just another part of our lifestyle of just being conscious of it.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how did the mold and the Lyme for your daughter and your son, how did that affect them neurologically? So you've had some different things spiral. Can
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. So with my son, just the binder protocol was enough
Mhm.
to reduce the toxins in him, as well as a very solid glutathione product. I use Dr. Rawls. My kids are both on it. And that was a big game changer for my son. And also just the diet for my son, really enforcing, just because it's like you really got to bring that inflammation down. That was all he needed. My daughter, unfortunately, did end up launching into PANS, which is similar to PANDAS. PANDAS is brought on by strep, but it's pediatric acute neuropsychiatric disorder, I believe. And it just put her in a huge flare. So my daughter's immune system attacks her brain. Her brain is inflamed. What we see is serious OCD. She also now does have Tourette syndrome. She was diagnosed with that. She also was diagnosed with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, which she probably always did have. But I think that the mold just kind of exasperated her symptoms, or, the onset, what we see. And, but so we're really in a really challenging place now with the pans of um, functioning, in a place of like functioning. So my daughter's very bright. She's a sophomore in high school. She's in all honors classes, one AP class. But Emily, she stopped going to school recently, because, and she does the tutoring because she just had a big flare even recently. I think being back in the school building, I don't know if there's mold in the school or if there's just a lot of stressors right? She's
Mhm.
a highly sensitive person and we just can't get a hold of it right now. But all things considered, she's doing a lot better energetically than she ever did because she actually receives IVIG, which is an intravenous globulin therapy. Um, and we go to a neurologist in New York named Dr. David Younger, um, specializes in autoimmunes and um, all things neurological. And so, without the IVIG, I think we would be in a really debilitating place. But she's physically, she's doing very, very, very well. But putting her in school with all of the stressors in the environment, it really triggers her still.
Mhm.
So we're still figuring that part out. And we're actually waiting to enter a program to kind of help her. It's a partial hospitalization program. But of course there's a wait list. So we're day by day. We're
Mhm.
day by day. There's so much to be grateful for. She doesn't have Lyme anymore. But I am still in this new world of really understanding PANS and getting her the help that she needs.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about it myself. Um, for some reason, I thought that it was something that happens at a younger age,
I know. Yeah. And it can happen at any age.
any age.
And it really depends where you live. I live in Chicago. I'm going to say I'm very grateful for my doctor, but she probably sees all of Chicago because we are really lacking professionals that are on the forefront of Lyme and chronic illness and PANS too. There is no specialist here. I actually even went to your website and I was like, okay, well, what do we have? And like nothing in Illinois. The area is just not, it's not their thing. They're not leading the efforts there. We have amazing hospitals, but when it comes to Lyme and PANS, they're not as educated and they're just not experts here. It's unfortunate. So I'm still learning too.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah.
All of these things that you happen to be dealing with.
The most complex. I know it is tricky.
Hmm. Okay, so what have you found has been during, I know you're still in the throes of it, but what have you found has been the most helpful in supporting your children's mental and emotional health during all of these challenges?
Great question. The most helpful thing is for me to just be solid.
Hmm.
That is the best way for me to help my kids because my son also has like really severe ADHD, emotional dysregulation, impulsivity, and things didn't get better for him until my husband and I together started actively and intentionally working on ourselves and getting solid. And so that when because every day really potentially could be one man's crisis, you know what I mean? And you just have to be like, okay, take things slow, be able to push the pause button. And what it takes for me is radical self-care.
Okay.
Radical self-care, like not self-care, radical self-care. And so like, what does that mean?
Mhm.
So I am very conscious about detoxing my life. I purge my closet, but I also purge people, places, and
Let's talk
things.
about that.
Let's. I do that.
Well, tell me about it. Tell me about where
Okay.
you start and what you mean by purging people. I have an idea, but I do want to
Mhm.
I want to get in there. Like, what are
Yeah.
your
So it's
suggestions and
my suggestion is you really have to take inventory and take stock of what drains your energy and what replenishes your energy. Now, already the situation of my kids is going to take my energy. I can't stop. I can't, fix them. We're in it. So what else takes away my energy. There are certain friendships where people keep, because one of my strengths is holding space for people
Mm-hmm.
and cutting to the chase of like what you need, but being very empathetic about that. But people in my own circle who I love can take that energy that I offer, and but they're not replenishing it. Like I'm not getting anything back from the friendship
Mm-hmm.
in return.
Yeah.
And so then when you start taking stock, there was one person that really did that a lot, two people, I should say, that really did that a lot to me, that I just had to revise the relationship. And for me, that included setting up a hard stop boundary to reset. Like sometimes your computer crashes and you have to do the hard reset,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to do a hard reset and give yourself the permission to do that. And I'm not a terrible person and I'm not a terrible friend, but there's no other way but a hard reset. And um and honestly, with both of those people, we're acquaintances now. They were very, very, very good friends and we're acquaintances, and I am totally okay with it. They
Mm-hmm.
might not be. I'm doing great over it. And I do recognize that it's not my task to make them okay with it. But that's not my
Mm-hmm.
job, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
their job because everybody's on their own journey.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean about people, places, and things. And I visually sometimes in my head have a circle. That's my circle. That's my circle. And inside the circle is like my immediate family. And then outside of the circle, or even on the circle, are where I put people in my life, family members, extended family, friends. But I could move them in and out of my circle. I could move them further away from my circle. It's all happening just sometimes as I meditate. And that's just me purging.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and there's nothing's even being said, but it's me kind of like that's what I mean about how that's how you purge people, is you're just kind of like moving them. Are they in your circle, on the boundary? Are they really far away? That's kind of what I practice. And then even places. So like, I don't drink as much alcohol anymore because I really have to be present for my children. That is a form of radical self-care. So I really just try to drink alcohol on the weekends, but
Mm-hmm.
even my weekends are busy, that I don't, if I'm going to like really have like that holiday party, I might have to clear like the next 2 days to enjoy myself. But that is a form of self-care, protecting my sleep. Radical self-care. Like I have got to be asleep by 10 p.m. So it's just a lot of boundaries and lifestyle that I practice.
So how do you protect your sleep? What are your methods for sleep? And you said you meditate.
Yeah, yeah. So how I protect my sleep is I have a lot of routines. But yes, so one of the things that protects your sleep is making sure your day is managed as well. Like it's just a big cycle. That's all it is. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
big cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a creature of routine. So I do a morning routine. It doesn't take long at all. It's literally 10 minutes. And my morning routine is I get up, I roll out my yoga mat, do some stretching, and then like a very light abdominal routine. I just got to get flowing. Maybe I do some yoga flowing, and then I meditate. I have to get some movement in before I meditate. And once I meditate and I'm aligned, then I know I'm in the proper mindset for the day. But then even throughout the day, I have to pull back and give myself 5 to 10 minutes of just like silence. Sometimes I meditate, sometimes I listen to a podcast, sometimes I do some yoga flowing, because I have to sustain myself throughout the whole day.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the evening comes, it's all about putting the phone away, right? Um, Decompression. So sometimes I take a shower at night just to decompress. And then I also do supplements. I do magnesium. Sometimes I do CBD. I also have a ritual because I like to optimize. I have this bathroom routine where I do a whole skincare thing. And it's just
Mhm.
like self-care. It's like, like loving yourself, putting forth
Mhm.
the effort. But I'm really into skincare. Some people are really into fitness. I'm
Mhm.
really into skincare. But I found, Emily, that doing like these 7 steps of skincare is part of my evening routine of
Mhm.
like setting myself up. Got to make sure the temperature is cold. Like I sleep at 67 degrees. I like it a little on the
Yeah.
colder side. And then I fall asleep a lot of times. I would say 3 to 4 nights out of the week, I fall asleep to Insight Timer are you familiar with that app?
No.
Okay. Insight Timer is an app you pay for it. Sometimes I use it in my morning routine when I need to do a meditation, but usually not. I usually use it for sleep. And there's so many amazing um, playlists for
Okay.
falling asleep to healing music. And it even tells you like the healing power of some of the songs. I don't want to call them songs because they're not. I mean, I really fall asleep to the sound. It's sound
Mhm.
healing. And it plays for 60 minutes, but I'm sure I fall asleep, in 10. But I'm really big in making those investments in sleep, best sleep possible.
Hmm. So you listen to that on your phone?
Yes, I do.
I was going to ask if you kept your phone near you.
I
You said
do.
put the
I
phone
do.
away.
I put the I don't, I'm not on it. Like I'm not
Mhm.
Instagramming or texting.
Mhm.
But I do. Yeah. I do listen to that if I put that on. It does happen like 4 nights a week.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
Calm.
Yes.
Um,
It's kind of similar. Headspace is a good one too. For whatever reason, I really lean towards Insight Timer. I think
I'm
it's a
gonna have to
little more
check it
new
out.
agey. It's kind of woo woo out there, you know.
Okay.
So that's probably why I love it so much.
Mm. Well, so how oftentimes parents, as we're just you're describing, we're describing parents caring for exceptional children don't take time to care for themselves like this. How can your coaching help parents and caregivers?
Yeah. So I do also do coaching, and really my coaching is more about helping moms specifically make that transformation. Because to help our kids, we really do become transformed. And so I kind of am like the navigator to help them do that. So we talk a lot about radical self-care and I'm putting things to paper, how we're going to be held accountable, but I'm also doing a lot of navigating to help the people I work with heal their trauma. That's a really big thing. Us as moms healing our emotional trauma does unlock something in our children. Every time I heal one piece of my own puzzle, um, I help clear something for my child. And this is a real phenomenon. It's called ancestral trauma or
Hmm.
generational trauma. I know a lot of people talk about the mother wound that's passed on. And so I really just kind of hold their hand and bring to the forefront the things that they do need to work on, and that's then where the therapist comes in and
Hmm.
helps them get through those things. I'm just kind of the coach. I've got like that natural ability to see really what's going on underneath.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's what I do, and it is, I do love it. It is rewarding, but I would really love to do this work also in another way. And that's why I'm setting up more of a course so that I can just help more people um, bring the awareness of, because I'm starting to see themes. There's
Hmm.
5 specific themes that come up. And I think this might be a more economical way for people to get the same benefits in their own journey.
Mm. Well, now you have me curious. What are these 5 specific themes?
Well,
Can't leave it at that.
we talked a lot about them, and I'll tell, the boundaries is one, healing childhood trauma is
Mhm.
another. There's a lot of gut issues. There's a lot of things that reside in our body. But I'm fleshing everything out on the course right now. So hopefully your listeners can like take a peek at that too.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Well, how can our audience find out more about you and your work and this course?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very active more on Instagram than Facebook, and it's just Liza's Very Happy Stories. And then my website is just veryhappystories.com. And I'm very responsive. So if people reach out, I'll definitely um connect back. And the course is going to be ready the first week of January, just
Perfect.
kind of right at that time where people are ready to start their transformation.
Mhm.
New year, new year, new you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, is there anything else that you would like to say to the Brain Possible community today to be complete?
Everything is possible, like joy, living your best life, all that good stuff, despite the adversity and the struggles, all that good stuff is still out there. And Emily, what an amazing community. I so admire all that you do and your resources. So thank you so much for what you put out into the world.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brain Possible podcast. Be sure to tune in every Wednesday for more empowering wisdom, expert advice, and inspiring stories. And be sure to subscribe and follow on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so that you don't miss out on that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. And if you feel inspired, we would love you to rate and review us so that we have the opportunity to reach more people. You can also visit thebrainpossible.com for more information on conditions, therapies, products, and practitioners that can help your family in their journey. Thank you for spending your precious time with us at The Brain Possible. See you next week and be well.